So the first step that you're going to take is you're going to open your favorite photo editing software. I'm going to use Photoshop in this case, and you're going to create a new file. You can use the default Photoshop size. We can change the title of our Photoshop document to Sci-Fi Grid Square, and you're going to press create. Leave everything else as it is. Now we are going to select the shape tool, drag your mouse on the screen to create a square, hold shift to create a square, a perfect square. Click on the square and place it anywhere on the screen. Control click on the rectangle layer to add a selection around the rectangle shape. And what we are going to do is we are going to duplicate the rectangle and after duplicating we're going to scale it down first, and then we are going to change its color, the color of the square behind the duplicated one. We're going to change it to white. And after we change the color to white, we're going to change the color of the second square to black. And we are done, that's it. And we are going to save this image as a JPEG. Let's first of all save our Photoshop file to avoid losing data. Then we'll export this image as a JPEG. Let's change the quality to great to ensure you don't lose any resolution. Hit save and we are done. We are going to use this document in Blender later. I'll be using Blender 3.4 in this case, and we are going to create a new scene. And after creating a new scene, you're going to select the cube, click on the cube, and go to the UV editing workspace. Now what we want to do is we want to reset the UVs of this cube. You want to hit U and click on reset, and it will reset the UVs of the cube, and change to the shading workspace. And let's expand this a little bit, and let's add an image texture node. Let's plug the image texture node to the let's first of all delete the principled BSDF, and let's add animation shader node. Let's delete this. Connect the color output of the image texture into the color input of the emission node, and connect the emission output to the surface input of the material output, and browse to where you save the image from your favorite photo editor, and double click it to load it on the image texture node. And now what you're going to do is you're going to add a math node. You're going to add a math node, and we're going to drop it between the connection between the image texture node and the emission node. And we are going to change the math node from add to multiply. And after we are done, then we can activate bloom the render settings. And what we're going to do next is we're going to add a mix shader node. You're going to add a mix shader and a transparent BSDF, and we're going to drop the mix shader between the connection between the emission and the material output, and we are going to connect the transparent BSDF to the first input of the mix shader node. And we have not achieved transparency yet. Don't worry about that. I'm going to show you. We're going to do a step later that will enable the transparency. Let's go back to the UV editing workspace so that we can learn how we can scale and kind of decrease and increase the size of the borders. And you see, if we scale it up, the borders become bigger. If we scale it down, it becomes the opposite. But there's a problem when you scale it up. There's this weird thing going on. So we're going to go back to the shading workspace, and we're going to change this option from repeat to extend. And let's try to scale it down now. It gets smaller. Let's scale it up. Yeah, you understand the logic. Now let's go back to the shading tab, and we made a mistake here. Let's change this to the strength input of the emission shader, and let's try and change the color to let's try a green color. Let's try a green color for the time being. Let's go to the material settings, and to achieve the transparency, let's activate alpha blend in the blend mode settings, and ensure that the transparency BSDF color is white. It doesn't have any saturation. Now if we try and scale it up, you can see what is happening, and we've successfully added a Scifi grid to our cube, and we are going to learn how we can swap the cube with something else. For example, we can use a head instead. Okay, now I'm going to teach you how to replicate the same effect on other objects. For example, you can see there's Suzanne right here, and I'm going to teach you how to transition from a solid color to the wireframe like I'm showing you on screen, and it's fairly simple. It's not difficult at all. So let's navigate to where I saved the cube. I'm going to shift to the layout workspace, and we're going to add a new object. Let's add a Suzanne. Let's add the monkey. We're going to click on Suzanne and shift click on the cube, and we're going to hit Ctrl L and link the material so that the material on the cube can be transferred to the monkey. Now we can get rid of the cube. Click on the cube and hit delete or X on your keyboard. Now let's click on Suzanne and let us reset the UVs. So let's shift to edit mode, click on the UV sub panel, and click on reset. The wireframe magically appears because we already have the material applied to the monkey. Now let's shift to the UV editing workspace and let's diminish the size of the lines of the Scifi grid, and we can see it gets smaller when we scale down the UV. Now we're going to go back to the layout workspace and we're going to duplicate the monkey, and we're going to go to the material properties, and let's get rid of this material. We're going to create a new material, and let's head to the shading workspace. Let's delete the principled BSDF, and let's add an emissions shader, and we're going to connect the emission shader to the surface input of the material output, and we're going to change the color of the emission shader to a green. Do not change anything else. Let's go back to the layout workspace, and we are going to now create the smooth transition between the solid color and the Scifi grid. We're going to add a plane, rotate it by 90, scale it up. We're going to use this plane to do a boolean that will divide the solid part and the Scifi grid, so that we can have one on one side and the other on the other side. Let's rename the Suzanne with the solid color. Let's rename it to Suzanne solid, and let's rename the Suzanne with the Scifi grid to Suzanne wireframe. Let's go to the Modifiers tab and let's add a boolean modifier. After adding the boolean modifier, use the eyedropper tool and select the plane we created. And as you can see, you cannot see the solid part on the other side anymore. Go to the object properties. Let's change the display of the plane from textured to wire, and as you can see, we can now see through it. Let's select the Suzanne solid once more. Let's go to the Modifiers tab and let's add a solidify modifier. Let's add a solidify modifier. Let's move it to the top of the modifier stack. Let's first of all increase, let's change this to 1. Let's reduce the thickness of the solidify modifier a little bit. Select the Suzanne wireframe, add a boolean modifier, source the plane, and as you can see, this happens. And I'm going to show you how to solve this. This weird thing happens, and to solve this, we are going to hit undo, and let's select the plane and duplicate by hitting Shift D, and let's rename our first plane to plane solid. Let's rename our first plane to plane solid, and let's rename the duplicated plane to plane wireframe. Let's select the Suzanne wireframe once more. Now let's source the plane wireframe, the second plane that we duplicated, and we're going to have the same effect, but now we're going to solve it for good, because now with this selected, we can flip the normals. Let's change to edit mode, and let's enable the face orientation so that we can see what is happening. Let's go back to object mode, and let's go to the object properties, And let's change this from wire to texture so that we can see. You see the normals are facing this way. Normals are facing this way, and you want the normals to face the other direction, this way. So what are we going to do to solve this? We are going to go to edit mode, hit Shift N to recalculate the normals, and check inside to flip the normals. Check inside to flip the normals. As you can see, now it appears to flip the normals like that. And we're going to go back to object mode. Let's turn off the face orientation. Let's change the display to wire, and we're going to add a sphere, an empty. Let's scale it up. Just display size, let's scale it up. And we're going to select our two planes, the plane solid and the plane wireframe. And let's parent them to the empty so that they move together at the same time. And let's select the empty. Now we're going to use this empty to dictate the transition. We're going to use this empty to dictate the transition. We're going to lock the Z and X axis because it's supposed to move along the Y axis. Now as you can see, there's this weird thing happening when we this is not supposed to happen. I'm going to show you how to solve this. This is not supposed to happen, and I'm going to show you how to solve this. Let's select the Suzanne wireframe to start with, and let's change to the modifier panel, and let's add a solidify modifier, and let's change the offset 1, and let's reduce the thickness to around 0.04 or 003, and let's take the solidify modifier to the top. As you can see, something happened. Let's select the boolean and click on hole tolerant. Check hole tolerant, and now that is fixed. We fixed the Suzanne wireframe. Now let's fix Suzanne solid. Select the boolean and check hole tolerant, and that's fixed. And now if we select our empty and move it, we have this smooth transition happening between the wireframe and the solid view. And we are done. You can see how simple this is. You can do this on any object. All you have to do is apply the material and UV reset, and we are done. That's it for today. Remember to subscribe, like the video, and hit the notification bell to get notified when I post more videos like this.